Robert Frost was having a very bad day. It was 1904, and in a very different season. It was December. And Robert Frost, the farmer, not the poet, had gone to town to sell eggs. He was very poor then. The farm wasn't doing well. His father-in-law had given it to him upon his marriage, that he might have a place to provide for his wife and children, and so far, it had not worked out that way. And just before Christmas, Robert Frost decided to go to town with a cartload of eggs nestled in hay, so that he could raise some money and his family might have a good Christmas that year. But nobody bought any. He waited all day. All day. He knew that he should be turning for home, that he'd have to drive his horse and cart through the forest. It would be very dark. But nobody bought any eggs. And with hope in his heart, he waited. He waited until he knew he should have turned back when the sun was finally setting. He waited even longer until it was completely dark. And then he packed his eggs back up and set out for home. Robert Frost was wondering what he would say to his wife when he got there and had to unload all the eggs again. The snow was starting to fall. He had never felt so low. All of his farming, all day long, he spent putting walls back together with stones that just seemed to fall back down, chopping up trees only to burn the wood and have to do it again, crops that failed. And still, despite how tired he was, he woke up a little bit early every morning to write poems. He wrote poems about all the happy things. No one wants to hear about sad things. He wrote about flowers and sunshine. And no one seemed to want to read his poems, his stupid flower poems. For some reason, the hardscrabble farmers of New England just weren't interested, and he couldn't figure out why. Waking up early for what? To make rhymes that no one read and then go farm the farm that never made him a penny? Driving his horse and cart through the woods in the dark, he stopped midway. He didn't want to cry in front of his wife. He didn't want his children to see that. Robert Frost was a very serious man and didn't like to let his emotions show. He didn't like to be vulnerable in front of anyone. But that night, one of the darkest nights of his life, he stopped in the snowy woods to have a good cry. How many of you have gone off to have a good cry by yourself? Sometimes all of us need to do that. Now, his horses didn't know what he was doing. They knew what the barn looked like. They knew there was hay there and water. They stomped their feet and they shook their heads. They were very confused horses. And when Robert Frost was finally done crying, he took a deep breath and he looked around. It was very quiet, except for the sweep of downy snowflakes. The woods were lovely, dark and deep. He didn't want to go on, but he knew then that he had miles to go before he could sleep. The next morning when he woke up, he wrote a very different kind of poem. A poem about how tough life can be sometimes. And from then on, he started to write about more serious things, about fights with his wife, about the wall falling down, and weird conversations with his farmer neighbors, about things going wrong. And suddenly, everyone wanted to read his poems. Robert Frost couldn't understand it. What's wrong with people? Well, it turns out that all of us go through tough times, and it can be really helpful to hear it talked about in a meaningful, profound, and beautiful way. The medium is not the message, but beauty does help sometimes. And Robert Frost went on to become not just one of the most famous American poets, but such a prolific poet that the choir can put together an entire music Sunday based entirely on Robert Frost's poems. He wound up buying another farm. It was not more successful. He later said he never made a penny off of anything that didn't involve a pencil. And yet from that time forward, Robert Frost would spend all day writing very hard and taking it very seriously, and waking up a little bit early each day to do a little bit of farming.